Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Ashley Wilcott. Thank you so much for being with us. Testimony has ended for the day in the Karen Reed murder retrial in Massachusetts. But before testimony began, the jury heard the attorneys lay out their cases in their opening statements. Here are some of the biggest moments in today's Daily Wrap.
At 6:04 a.m. on January 29, 2022, the alarm bell sounded in the Canton Fire Department. Firefighter paramedic Timothy Nuttall knew what that meant. As the car pulled up to 34 Fairview, the ambulance, he stood at the back door, the doors open. He could hear a woman screaming and shrieking. Now, he wanted any information, because when you're trying to save someone, you want to know, are they on drugs, medication, do they have a heart condition? And he looked up at Miss Reed and he said, "What happened?" And you'll hear her words to Firefighter Nuttall. She said, "I hit him, I hit him, I hit him." You will learn that on January 29th, 2022, when the defendant and Mr. O'Keefe were in front of 34 Fairview Road, you will learn that Mr. O'Keefe got out of the car and he stood by the side of the road after an argument with the defendant. That argument, that anger fueled by heavy intoxication, and her SUV drove away. She drove at least 35 feet away. The argument was over. It had ended. She then put the Lexus into reverse, put her foot on the gas pedal, and began to press, not 25%, not 50%, up to 75% acceleration. She clipped John O'Keefe. He fell backwards, hit his head, broke his skull, and she simply drove away. This man who helped, a lifetime of help, was left at the corner of that yard, left to die with no help.
There was no collision with John O'Keefe. There was no collision. There was no collision. You'll see from the evidence in this case that this case carries a malignancy, a cancer that cannot be cut out, a cancer that cannot be cured, and that cancer has a name. And his name is Michael Proctor. He was the lead investigator on the case officer, the architect of the entire prosecution. You'll learn there's not a single part of this case, folks, not a single part that he didn't touch, that he didn't direct, that he didn't orchestrate personally. He didn't care about finding the truth. In his world, his priority was to protect the Brotherhood, to protect that blue wall, to protect his friends who were at the Albert's house that night. You'll also learn after this incident, and within days of one another, both Brian Higgins and Brian Albert, both police officers, both trained investigators, got rid of their phones. And what else you'll learn, Brian Albert got rid of. Shortly after this incident, Brian Albert got rid of his house, the whole thing, just sold it. His childhood home, a home that had been in the Albert family for generations, he literally sold it mere months after this incident. Dog rehomed, phones destroyed, house sold. You'll learn that all these things happened shortly after the incident where John O'Keefe was found unresponsive and dying in Brian Albert's front lawn. You'll learn that during the trial, the Commonwealth bears the highest burden known to our justice system. They must prove every element of every charge beyond a reasonable doubt, and they're not going to be able to do that. Not when every piece of this case was handled by a disgraced investigator with a motive to protect his friends, not when the physical evidence contradicts their very theory, not when their own medical examiner won't call this case a homicide. By the end of this trial, you'll conclude that Karen Reed is not guilty of hitting John O'Keefe with her SUV. There was no collision. She's the victim of a botched and biased and corrupted investigation that was never about the truth, folks. It was about preserving loyalty. And at the end of this trial, we'll ask you to return the only verdicts, all three of them, that are consistent with the evidence, the science, the truth, and justice. Not guilty, not guilty, not guilty.